A very good evening and welcome to Economic Forum. I am Love Mobanda. I hope I find you well. As always on the program Economic Forum, we look at the various aspects of the Zimbabwean economy, be it agriculture, it could be banking, it could be industry, manufacturing, mining, whatever it has to do with the Zimbabwean economy. We discuss it on this program. And tonight we are going to be doing exactly that with someone who watches the Zimbabwean economy and is a past president of the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce, Mr. LUCKSON ZEMBE. Good evening. Welcome to Economic.
Good evening, Lovemo. Good evening, viewers.
We start off, Mr. ZEMBE, by looking at the enablers of the economy. The joke now is that there's no electricity because there's no water to generate it, and there's no water because there's no electricity to pump it. How well are we doing with economic enablers, electricity and water specifically?
We are not doing very well. In fact, we are in a bad situation as far as electricity and water is concerned. Number one, as a country, we have not invested in energy. Despite the fact that we've been growing our economy, more people coming in, the population is growing, the demand has been growing, but we have not invested in growing the supply side of energy. And that's why we're in some of these challenges, despite obviously not discounting that the current challenge has been exacerbated by the drought situation, which has created low water in the Kariba, and hence this great reduction in terms of the capacity and the electricity that we can generate, almost by 50% that we can generate from the Kariba. And that's one of the biggest challenges, and that is affecting. At the present moment, with the current load shedding, where in terms of power supply, we are now in a 24-hour day. You will be lucky if you are able to get power for 8 hours. In a lot of situations, it's much less than that, and it comes in the evenings. And this is what is really seriously capacitated our situation. So we have got those implications. Even the water situation, this country had a well-developed agricultural infrastructure, which includes dams. Well-developed, which we've messed around. Number one, by just plowing everywhere, and a lot of siltation has taken place, and a lot of dams, water are running out, and they're drying up, and we can no longer supply water to the farms because of how we have mismanaged the ecosystem, the environment. And it's payback again because of that mismanagement, which unfortunately, even up to this day, we are not doing much to be able to correct that situation. But let me hasten to say, there is one official minister in the government that I would like to say hands off. He's a workhorse, and he is coming in and to try and revive agriculture. That's Minister Perence Shiri, and his program and what he's doing to try and make sure that we revive the infrastructure and we stop the nonsense of really people just sitting themselves anywhere, doing whatever they are doing and disturbing the ecosystem. Nature, if you disturb nature and you play around with it in the way you want, when it then gets angry, we all know it, what happens with nature. In terms of droughts, in terms of all these upheaval, in terms of the cyclones that will then come and hit us back. So we have serious issues with regard to the economic enablers, especially the power and water issues.
On power, Mr. Zembe, there's a school of thought that because water is an uncontrollable, we can't determine how much water we should have. Therefore, let's not put too much faith in hydroelectricity, because it is so susceptible to the vagaries of the supply of water.
We put all our eggs in one basket, so to speak. And because we're Kariba and we're saying all is well because we've got this big, one time the largest man-made lake, in the inland, okay, and we were all basking in the glory of, the Kariba. And what we forgot to do is to watch the radar and the changes that were taking place in climatic conditions, which then affecting the power generation. Number two, we did not superimpose the growth in the economy and the demand of electricity that will come in through. Number three, we did not diversify, and this is why in terms of business strategy, diversification is very important. You don't put all your eggs in one basket. You diversify and make sure that you have got more in business income streams. If you go into a supermarket, that's why they've got confectionaries, they've got clothes, they've got this, so many lines of business. And that's what we have failed to do even in terms of power generation. And now we are trying to do that in terms of thermal power. Number one. Number two, the gas, we have got some of the hugest, the largest gas reserves in this world. We have not tapped them. Interesting enough, Zimbabwe, on the global map, it's one of those countries that has got what we call the highest solar radiation. In other words, it's one of the countries that receives the highest solar energy in this world, which we have failed to tap. And one of the things that I would like to recommend to government, and I'm happy that now the new Minister of Energy, Minister Chasi, he has really got the handle now and beginning to drive it, which is very good. But what we need to do is to separate that. And one of the mistakes that we did was to ask ZESA to spearhead that diversification. And people who were schooled in hydro and thermal, and we are giving them a completely new field area, which they don't understand. And obviously, that's why they neglected it, and they would say it's too costly, it's difficult, etc., and all the like. What we should do, and do immediately, is to separate and create a separate company that drives solar from ZESA. Let ZESA focus on its core business, whatever it is in the area. So we need to create a different company altogether, and that's will create then competition. And thirdly, still on power, we need to hive off the transmission company from ZESA. And why am I saying that? I'm working with certain clients in the terms of the solar power development. Because now, all these other companies that are working in the IPPs, okay, they have to feed into the national grid in terms of transmission. And ZESA then says, no, ZTDC, which is the transmission company, is our company. You have to dance to our tune, whether we would like to give you capacity to carry your power wherever you want to carry it. So from a strategic point of view, we must, as a matter of agency, right, separate the transmission company. Let the transmission company stand on its own, so that all other people who generate power, right, they deal with the transmission company, right, and the transmission company then knows it builds capacity to be able to transmit power from point A to B from all these, and that's one of the challenges we're facing.
You are saying this at a time when government is actually bundling ZESA.
It's putting back ZESA together, right? But what is important? This is why I'm saying it's important to be strategic about these issues and to understand. Let me give you the telecoms companies, for instance. This is why if you go to a lot of countries around the world, there's one company that builds the backbone, the trunking system. Not what we are doing here, where 5 different companies dig side by side, right? And that all that cost of all that is happening has to be loaded onto the consumer. And that's why we've got very expensive, even in terms of data costs here, because of failure to strategically manage, these issues. And I'm saying it's very important to realize that now the transmission, right, of power needs to be separated from all companies. So we create one company whose responsibility is to transmit power. It doesn't matter who generates it. Very soon, houses, domestics in houses will be generating power. So we need a separate, independent, dedicated company that then buys power and transmits it from point to B and remove the current conflict.
Thank you very much, Mr. ZEMBE. Let me come back to that point of power, solar power and transmission in the second segment of Economic Forum. You want to join us there? Welcome to the second segment of Economic Forum, where this evening we're talking to an economics analyst and former president of the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce, Mr. LUCKSON ZEMBE. Now, before the break, you were talking about the transmission of power and how PPPs can come in better if transmission is independent.
It's very important to realize that, okay, fine, we're going to have a generation of power all over the place, and that's what is moving. As I say, right now, as we're talking, roofs are going to be made of power, solar cells. Okay, so individuals will be generating power that goes then and fed into the system. And it's important then strategically for us to be able to de-link the transmission from ZESA at this present point in time, so that they can then focus on building capacity to be able to transmit. Also, like some of the clients that we're talking about, people who want to come in and build. Once we do that, they're even able, they're willing to come in and capacitate and build a good trunking system. That's what you see all over the world. And we're not inventing something new here. It's already there and it's already happening. But what it does is, number one, as I said earlier on, what we are doing at the present moment, and very soon ZESA is saying, no, we have no capacity to carry your power. We are now going to be forced to then build a transmission line alongside ZESA lines. Just like what is happening with telecoms, where you've got everybody digging along each other. In other words, if I use a very simple analogy, is to be able to say, fine, you can't fit on our road to Mtare. You create your own road here, you create your own road here, and everybody's creating their own little roads all over the place. It's chaotic. So we need to look at those issues, which are very important, so that we can continue, we can be able to now tap on the capacity of Zimbabwe to be able to generate sufficient renewable energy. We have all that it takes. All it needs is I hope and trust that the Ministry of Industry will then look at these issues, and also the Minister of Economic Planning, Finance and Economic Planning, in their fiscal policy. They will look now at these issues in terms of capital development, to say, what do we really now need to be able to do to create capacity and to strategically build a systems. That's one of the things that we lack here, to understand that we are a system. We're a system. So you can't just ask somebody, your hand cannot just think on doing things separately. No, that body is a system. Whatever happens here, it affects everybody else. So as we think, we must think from a systems perspective. How do we build up a system, an economic system that feeds on each other, that leverages and that has got synergies on each other, and that will then deliver efficiency and reduced cost to the end user.
Government has eased the importation of solar products and equipment. And obviously now the expectation is that industry will jump to that.
It's exciting, and that's very good. That's a very good move, good policy to be able to do that. And definitely industry is moving on that. Even individuals, we are saying, as Zimbabweans, one of the issues that I also want to appeal to Zimbabweans in terms of our mindsets. When we are stuck with something else, Zimbabweans get stuck, and it's difficult to change them. One of the things that we need to learn as Zimbabweans is to learn to change and adapt to new things. And we are saying we are now having challenges with ZESA. There are alternatives. When we begin to think of alternatives, it brings in substitutes, it brings in competition, and it also then challenges industry. When they realize that if we don't provide affordable goods and services to people, they will go for alternatives and they'll be out of business. And that's what I'm appealing to Zimbabweans in terms of our mindset and our thinking. So on energy, I'm saying there are alternatives to energy, not cutting trees, right? There are alternatives. Solar is an alternative, and the cost over the last 5 years, the cost of solar units has gone down almost like 5 times, and they're getting much and even more affordable. And that's all we need.
Unfortunately, there's no alternative for water.
That's very important. Okay, yes, that's why water is the most precious, right, commodity in this world than anything else, because we don't have alternatives for water. And one of the things that we're failing to do, even as Zimbabweans, when we get water, is water harvesting. How do we harvest water? Okay. If you go around the world now, where now domestic people are in their houses, we have got roofs. We put in gutters, we build reservoirs under the ground, collect all that water, it goes straight into your reservoir, and you store your water. Right? When it runs dry, when you need it, you just leverage it. And that's what we need to do. Even in terms of runoffs, if you look at the runoffs and how much of our water that we receive, we are blessed with, which just run off and it goes to the sea, right? Which we could be harvesting very well and being able. So in terms of really receiving water from above from our good Lord. I think we're receiving fairly good amount of water. We are failing to harvest. We are failing to manage these water sources and bodies. So back is our problem. With whatever we are receiving, we are failing to manage and to use those effectively. If we do that and we focus on that and say, how best do we harness and do we take care of whatever, even the land, we are failing to use the land that we have. It's amazing that Israel, right, which is 95% pure sand desert, but it can feed the world. And look at Zimbabwe in terms of how rich the land we have, the soils that we have, but we are hungry. We can't produce enough because it's nothing to do with drought. Drought has been there anyway, by the way. It's not the first time to have droughts. They've always been there, and these challenges. Okay. It's us failing to use the resources that we have. Use them properly, prudently, judiciously, effectively, and efficiently, and making sure that whoever is managing our resources, there are people who know what they're doing. So, and I'm placing that challenge on us as Zimbabweans, all of us together. Right? I'm not pointing a finger at any one particular person. No, I'm saying all of us, we have to come together and say, how best do we manage the resources that we have been given, so that as an economy we can tick. Lastly, before I go, let me just even make reference to mining. This country, one of the richest countries in this world, in terms of mineral resources. But this Njambanja Chikorokoza type of mining and the devastating effects that it is having in the economy, in the environment, it's not good. We're not saying people must stop mining. We are saying let's do things properly without it destroying the environment and the water. If you look at the water situation we are talking about, most of our water challenges are coming from poor agricultural systems, poor mining systems.
We'll come back to the discussion with Mr. Zembe in the third and final segment of our Economic Forum. Thank you for watching. Welcome to the third and final segment of our Economic Forum, where this evening we're talking to past Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce President, Mr. LUCKSON Zembe. Mr. Zembe, you were talking about Zimbabweans coming together, Zimbabweans creating solutions to challenges facing Zimbabwe. And it's interesting, the points that you were making there, particularly against the background of the fact that it is approximated that about 40% of the things that we are importing into the country, we can actually produce locally.
That's very true. We can produce. And we used to produce, by the way. Okay? So Zimbabwe used to produce. And we used to be one of the most productive. And Zimbabwean products used to be well sought after around the world, all over the world. We could import. So that capacity we had, yes, admittedly, we've lost the capacity. We've lost the skills. Our equipment is antiquated. But what we are saying is we also boast of being the most educated. Right? Okay. But what I am challenging on our education, and I'm happy with the new curriculum, by the way. Okay, it teaches people to think and do, right? Which is very important. Okay, that we have that, doing part of it, which is the vocationalization of our education and the skilling. Because as a country, through the years now and the brain drain, we've lost those technocrats. The world, it's amazing that even our own countries around us, they're being driven by Zimbabweans in terms of their system. So yes, it's very important that we are able to capacitate now ourselves and rebuild back our skills base, bring back some of the skills that we've got out there in the world. But we can only bring them back if we create home sweet home. In other words, let's make it a joy, a pleasure to be in Zimbabwe and to work in Zimbabwe. And those people, they're not enjoying life out there. After all, we are always reminded that you are not, this is not your homeland. And look at what is happening even in America, where they're now telling, go back where you came from. And that we need to be able to realize. And this is why we as Zimbabweans, especially our leadership, any policy that impoverishes, that creates poverty, that creates suffering amongst the people is bad policy. And that's what we need to do. And our leadership, they should know they are there to create better life better standards of living for this country. Okay, and that's the challenge that we have at the present moment. And we can be able to create and attract even the skills around the world to come to this country. And people, this is one of the best countries to live in terms of weather, in terms of environment, in this world. It is. But we are failing to even use this gem, this jewel that our good Lord has given us. And that's a challenge on all of us, and especially our leadership. And I'm looking forward to that as the Minister of Finance is preparing his mid-term fiscal policy, that they will be able to address, for instance, number one, taxation. You don't tax people. At the present moment, he's taxing people to poverty. And that's wrong. It's not good. I know he's boasting of having made money, surpluses. But when people are dying, hospitals, they have no medication, right? They have no equipment. Doctors can't operate. Mothers can't deliver properly because there's no equipment. Meanwhile, our financial director, our financial manager is holding on to money and saying, I've got money in the bank. That's not what we appointed the minister for. We appointed the minister to make sure that he finances the economy and that the economy runs smoothly. We have power, we have water, we have goods and services. You know, that's his job. So if he says, I've got money surplus in his kit when the industry is dying, when people are dying because there's lack of medication and all the like, that's bad, Honorable Minister. Money is supposed to make things work for us, for the economy, for people. And that's what I'm hoping, that in his midterm fiscal policy, number one, he must reduce taxation.
Money must be in people and business.
No doubt about it. It must not be in government's hands. No, it must be in people's hands. It must be in business. That's where the economy takes place. At the present moment, the policies are to mop out money from the economy, from people and business, and put it in government. No wonder why there's a high level of corruption. And they end up doing all sorts of things which they should not be doing. So what's important is to make sure that money goes back to business. Money goes back to the people, and we can create jobs. Because we can't boast of money in the kitty when people have no jobs. What are we talking about? What's your role, Mr. Minister? It's to create jobs and make sure that the economy is functioning. And that's what we are saying. Same thing with the buttressing of the monetary policy, which we are saying, yes, it's important. Now we have got our ZIM dollar, right, which we have. But it has to be anchored on fundamentals of the economy that makes sure that its value is sustainable. And that's key. It's good to have your own currency. That's part of sovereignty, by the way. And it's important. We're a sovereign nation. We should have our sovereign currency that we have. But what is important is we must have the building blocks, the necessary pillars that which we anchor our own local currency or domestic currency on, so that we don't continue running now. Look at inflation. What has happened, right? From last month, in June, inflation jumped up from 96, now on 176%. And we're back into the hyperinflation era of inflation. And people haven't forgotten where we are coming from. And unfortunately, if we don't come up with policies that address, and I'm saying as a way of suggestions, number one, reduce taxation on companies, on people. Because when you reduce taxation on companies, you're actually giving them money to finance business, to finance production, and to create jobs. When you give money to the people, these are the consumers, right? They will then buy the goods and services that are being produced by companies, and the economy then begins to tick, and they can get then their taxation from various other sources, which is very important. Number one, that's number one. Number two, okay, we need to be able to reduce further in terms of the tariffs on imported equipment, on raw materials that we need for our industry, deliberately, to make sure that we do. When people celebrate about Zimra, okay, and having made so many right now, okay, it's doing very well in terms of collection. And Zimra collects. And they're implementing agents. They implement government policy. They've been told, here is law. We have put a law that you must go and collect so much from ZEMBE. They will do that. So Zimra will continue, and they're doing it very well. But what we are saying is, okay, all that money and the billions that are being collected, we need them in industry. We don't need them in government coffers. Right? So our model, our formula for running this economy is not good. It needs to be changed, and it needs all of us to get together, right, as key stakeholders and see what formula can we put together that will ensure that the economy, the system, will run properly and will be able to deliver the vision that our good president has said, and which we have all bought into, a middle-income economy, right, by 2030. These issues need to be addressed, together with us, so that we can be able to really drive home and be able to achieve our objective. And when in doing so, let me also advise the president. He has got an advisory board that he appointed of eminent individuals. My suggestion is he must have a mix. He must invite institutions. One of the things that we should know in governing a country is that we govern a country through institutions, not through individuals. And my recommendation to the Comrade President is to say, invite ZNCC. If you invite LUCKSON ZEMBE as past president of ZNCC, you have not invited ZNCC. Invite ZNCC on your board. Invite CZI, invite Chamber of Mines, invite the Law Society, invite institutions, work with institutions, strengthen institutions. Then things will work.
There you have it, Mr. LUCKSON ZEMBE, past president of the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much for coming on the program and for sharing.
Thank you, Lavo.
We had from Mr. ZEMBE, he had messages, advice, words for everybody. Minister Mtuli Mncube, Governor Mangunja, His Excellency the President, there was also advice for him. The common man on the street, if bread is too expensive, let's get potatoes, sweet potatoes, substitutes. Thank you very much for having watched the Economic Forum this evening. It was good to have you along.